Hello students, welcome to Accounting 2302 Managerial Accounting. This is Dr. Mercado speaking and welcome back. In this particular lecture we are going to be covering problem 16.2A. Now this is a comprehensive problem that covers basically the entire chapter, so it's going to be very difficult for me to basically do a summary of the problem. But let's first look at the problem. It's quite a lengthy problem and you will be seeing this problem in your exam. That is why I've decided to cover it with you. That way you can have an overview and a deep explanation of how it's covered. Now I've done some calculations here on the side, but we will cover that later. So what are we going to do in this problem? So in this problem, we're going to be doing entries and schedules for unfinished jobs and completed jobs. Okay, so we have a company, Ottoson Fencing, that uses job order costing. The following data summarizes the operations related to production for December, the first month of operations, brand new business. We have just begun operations, so we're going to be doing some journal entries. Okay. And then we have a series of transactions or events that occur that we have to record entries for. Okay. Now these entries are dispersed through the entire chapter, so you do need to read the entire chapter to be able to understand what is going on when we are transferring materials, labor, or anything into the working process. Okay. So before we begin the actual problem, I just want to give you a quick rundown on job order costing for a manufacturing business. This is coming straight out of your ebook. So basically, job order costing summarizes the manufacturing costs by jobs. Okay, so you have a specific job from one customer. They have requested, like in the ebook, they are doing guitars. So you have a job from a customer, job number 72, and they're wanting specific types of guitars, a specific quantity, a specific color, whatever the case might be. Okay, so we are tracking our work by jobs. Okay, every job, the cost associated with the job is tracked separately. Okay, so like in this particular example, it shows the flow of the manufacturing cost process. Okay, so we begin with materials inventory. We have raw materials that we're going to make into our product, right, our finished good. Okay, so in this case, we are making guitars. So we start with wood and nails and all of this good stuff. Okay, that is our materials, that is our starting point. Then we transfer those materials over to working process. In working process, a human or a machine, depending on what is it, who's manufacturing the product, okay, is putting or making this product into what it should be. In this case, guitars. So we are assembling guitars. So in the working process, we're going to have direct labor, factory overhead, and of course the materials that we push through to the working process. We wouldn't be able to do the guitars without the materials. So we transfer materials into working process and then we add direct labor and factory overhead to it. Okay, and then the individuals do their stuff. They make the guitars, and then once it's completed, that is transferred. Those completed guitars are transferred to finished goods. Okay, so finished goods those are the jobs that are 100% complete, that are ready to be sold to its customers. Okay, so we have in our warehouse our completed jobs. Okay, and then once those jobs are completed, we sell them. Okay, and we have to calculate the cost of goods sold. Okay, so that is basically the flow, and then we repeat. Okay, every month or every cycle we repeat. We begin with the materials, we add our labor and overhead, we do our stuff and we manufacture it. Once it's done, we transfer the completed jobs to finished goods, and then we sell them. Okay, so in job order costing, perpetual inventory records are maintained for materials, working process, and finished goods inventory. So we keep a record for each of the jobs. So here we have materials. We have the different types of materials that we're using. For example, we have hickory, oak, maple, so on and so forth. The different types of woods that we are. So maybe some guitars are made out of hickory, others are oak, others are maple. So it just depends what the customer wants, okay? Or what is it that we're manufacturing? Maybe we're manufacturing, just maple guitars. That's going to be one of our jobs. So that's what we're going to be requesting, okay? Once we requisition the materials into the actual production process, we are going to move them into the working process, into specific jobs. Okay, what jobs are we working on, who are we making these jobs for, or what is it that the demand is for those specific jobs. Once those guitars or products are completed in the manufacturing process, then they're moved over to finished goods, where this is where we keep track of all of the guitars that are ready to be sold. And that is where they end up. So we start with materials inventory, move over to working process, where we add our overhead and our labor, and we actually complete the manufacturing process there. Once they're done, we move them over to our finished goods inventory, where they're actually eventually sold to the customers. Okay, so this is just a quick recap of the cycle of what we're going to be doing. Now, the problem that we have is extensive. It's very long, and it basically puts together, like I said, a great deal of the chapter that we're covering. Okay, so let's begin. We're going to tackle one at a time. Okay, and they're asking us to record the journal entries. Okay, so we don't have any dates, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting the letter. Okay, so we can keep track of the actual transaction that we're doing. Okay, so letter A, materials purchased on account. Okay, so we are buying materials, and we are paying for them on account, which means we bought them, and we're going to pay for those materials at a later point in time. So you ask yourself, what is it that you're buying? What do I have now? I am buying materials. So I have more materials. Materials is an asset account. Okay, so materials will increase by the $50,000. Okay, and how did I pay for these materials? Well, it says on account. Anytime you see the word on account, we are doing accounts payable. It's a liability. Okay, we should be familiar with all of these concepts from your Principles of Financial Accounting course. Okay, so that is the first entry that we have, letter A. Materials purchased on account, $50,000. Okay, so we've got that in the books. Okay, now we're going to move on to letter B. Okay, letter B. Materials requisitioned and factory labor used. Okay, so here we have the jobs that we're working on, jobs 301 through 306. We've got the materials that were requisitioned for these specific jobs and the labor that associated with working on those specific jobs. Okay, so that was provided to you in the problem. What I did was I got a total of my materials and my labor. So all I did was add, and I'm going to get my calculator out so I can show you. Okay, I simply added my materials of $18.50 plus my labor of $25. That gives me $43.50. Okay, I did that same thing for every job. So for job 302, I did $31.50 plus $72.20, and that gave me $10,370. Okay, so I just repeated that for every job that we have to get our total. Okay, so that's just illustrating you how I got my total information. You add your materials and you add your labor. Okay, now what we're going to do here is it's saying materials are requisitioned and factory labor is used. So we are actually, materials is usually in the warehouse. Now we've called the warehouse and we've told them, send me materials for these jobs. Okay, and we have to figure out or do the entry to be able to move the materials from the material account to the working process, because now we're actually going to begin working in the manufacturing phase. Okay, so to figure that out, we're going to have to go ahead and figure out what my working process total is. Okay, how much am I putting in my work in process? Okay, so in my working process, okay, there are different things that go into your working process. Like I explained, we go materials, labor, and overhead. Okay, so I've already got my totals here. I'm going to go ahead and add my totals. I'm going to pick up the totals that include materials and labor, and let's see what that gives us. $43.50 plus $10,370, $75.50, $4,200, $10,455, $46.70. Okay, now I'm going to stop there because those are all of my jobs. Okay, those are my jobs 301 to 306. Okay, so up to there, we have combined for materials and labor had a cost of $41,595. Okay, so that is what I am going to put into my working process. That's how much I've spent in material and labor for jobs 301 through 306. Okay, so in my working process, I'm going to increase it by $41,595. Okay, that is how much has been put into working process, includes labor and materials. Okay, now we also have to bring in our factory overhead. Okay, remember, factory overhead are the costs associated with the factory. These are not costs directly associated with the actual manufacturing, but we need these costs. This could be the depreciation on the equipment, the rental of the facilities, so on and so forth. So here we have for general factory use, $1,200 of materials. This could be materials that are used for the manufacturing, or this could be materials to upkeep the facility, the factory. And we have labor. This could be labor of the maintenance individuals or the supervisors or things of those natures. Now, these costs are not directly tied to the actual manufacturing of the goods. Okay, so for that, we've got general factory use of $1,200 and labor of $5,000. That's going to give me a total of $6,200. Okay, so in your working process, you're going to put your labor and materials, and in factory overhead, you put your factory overhead, which is for general factory use. That gives you $6,200. Okay, now what's going to happen when we requisitioned? Okay, you had materials in the warehouse, right? You had materials because you bought the materials up here. Okay, so you bought $50,000 of materials, but now you've used up some of those materials. Okay, so when you use materials, the materials account or balance will drop because you've used them. You no longer have them. So the question is, how much have we used in materials? So we're going to get our magical calculators out. Don't be afraid to use a calculator. And we're focusing on materials. So we're going to add 1850, 3150, 2200, 1900, 4230, 1770, and 1200. This is all of the materials that have been requisitioned. Okay, all of them. So you're going to add all of your materials column, and that's going to give you $16,300. So I am going to reduce my materials balance by $16,300 because I have moved that materials into my working process. Okay, so when you buy materials, you debit. When you requisition materials to be put into working process, you credit the materials account. Okay, now we have people working, right? You have factory labor working. Okay, we haven't paid them yet, but we're going to pay them at the end of the month or whenever we have to pay our employees. So for now, I'm going to put the money into my wages payable. I owe my employees money for these jobs. How much money do I owe them? Okay, so we're going to get our magical calculator out once again, and we're going to add our labor. Okay, 2,500, 7,220, 5,350, 2,300, 6,225, 2,900, and 5,000. Okay, we're going to add all of our labor because our employees worked, so we have to pay them $31,495. Now, very important when you're doing your entries, like in this case, we have more than one transaction. Okay, I recommend that you make sure that after every transaction, your debits equal your credits. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a quick addition here to make sure that my debits, I'm sorry about that, my debits equal my credits. Okay, so that's my debit column, that's my credit column. If you see, they're both $47,795, so that means I'm in balance. Just make sure that you check. A common mistake is your debits don't equal your credits, and that's going to throw you off. So debits must always equal credits, okay, for every transaction. So if you see here, I have a debit of 50, a credit of 50. So the sum of these two equal the sum of these two over here on the credit side. Okay, so that is my entry for letter B. Okay, materials requisitioned and labor used. Okay, now let's look at letter C. Okay, letter C. Factory overhead costs incurred on account, $1,800. Factory overhead cost incurred on account. Okay, so we are incurring additional factory overhead. I don't know what we purchased. They don't tell us, but they've classified it under overhead, and we're paying this overhead on account. So what did we incur? We incurred factory overhead of $1,800, okay, because we need to tally up all of the total overhead that we've spent. So in transaction B, we've already had overhead of labor and materials of $6,200. Now we've got an additional factory overhead of $1,800, and that was paid on account. Anytime you see on account, we're going to use accounts payable, okay? And that would be $1,800. Accounts payable is a liability, normal balance of a credit. Okay, so that takes care of letter C. Okay, now a lot of this ties back to principles of financial accounting, so you might need a little refresher to go back to your journal entries for this. Okay, letter D. Depreciation of machinery and equipment, $2,700. Okay, so we are depreciating the machinery and equipment that we use to manufacture the product. Okay, now you have to ask yourself, does the depreciation go under materials, labor, or overhead? Okay, so depreciation does not have to do with materials, and depreciation has nothing to do with labor. Okay, depreciation will always go under factory overhead. Okay, so we have factory overhead of $2,700. Okay, and we are going to offset that against our accumulated depreciation for machinery and equipment. Okay, of $2,700. Okay. So we are debiting factory overhead for the depreciation because you have to classify it. You have to figure out, okay, you're going to pretend you have 3 buckets: materials, labor, and overhead. So you have to put it in one of those 3 buckets. The depreciation on the machinery does not apply to materials, does not apply to labor, therefore it goes into the factory overhead bucket. Okay, that is letter D. Letter E. Okay, letter E. The factory overhead rate is $40 per machine hour. So we are using some type of machinery to manufacture our goods. Okay, so we have to be able to calculate the machine hour cost for using those machines, right? So the overhead rate is $40 per machine hour, and then they give us the machine hours per job. So we use the machine, for example, in job 301, we used it for 30 hours. Okay, for job 302, we used it for 60 hours. Okay, so the cost is going to fluctuate based on the number of machine hours used. Okay, so for letter E, it's telling you that the factory overhead rate is $40. That they gave you that right there, $40 per machine hour. And we use the machine a total of 300 hours. Okay, so that means that we spend $12,000 on machine hours. Okay, now using the machine, okay, applies to, guess where it's gonna go? Okay, so we are using a machine to help us manufacture our goods. Okay, so we are going to put this $12,000, and we got the 12,000. Remember the 40 times the 300 hours. So it says here 12,000. So it says the factory overhead rate is 40 per machine hour, and these are the machine hours used. Okay, so what's happening here? This is part of my work in process. Using the machines allows us to complete the job. So it is work in process. Okay, $12,000. Okay, and what kind of an expense is this? This is factory overhead, okay, of $12,000. So my working process, we added a cost of $12,000 because we need those machines to be able to, manufacture our goods. So that cost is going to be added to my working process cost, and it's going to be offset against my factory overhead. Okay. Now, letter F. Okay. Letter F says jobs completed are 301, 302, 303, and 305. Okay. So remember, we have all of these jobs from 301 through 306, but in letter F, only jobs 301, 302, 303, and 305 are completed. So we have to move those completed jobs out of working process and into finished goods because those jobs are done. So we're going to have to do some calculations for that, and I've got my table up here. Okay, so the problem says, let's read the problem, 301, 302, 303, and 305. 301, 302, 303, and 305. These are the completed jobs. Okay, these are the completed jobs, okay, that we have to calculate. Okay, so we can move them because they're done. So how much did we spend in direct materials for job 301? We're going to look at the table over here, and we spend $1,850. Okay, and then we spend in labor, $2,500 in labor. Okay, and then for the machine hours, we're going to get our calculator, and we spend 30 hours at, let me multiply it, 30 times $40 is the rate. I spent $1,200 on machine hours, so that's on my overhead. Okay, and I'm going to get my sum. Okay, so let's do this all over again for the next job. That's $5,550. Okay, so let me go ahead and mark this one. This job is done. Okay. Now let's do job 302. How much did I spend in materials? We spent $31.50. In labor, I spent $72.20. And I am getting these numbers from the table right here. Okay. And then for the factory overhead, I'm going to look at my machine hours. For 302, I used 60 machine hours at a rate of $40 per hour. That gives me $2,400. Okay, so for my overhead is $2,400. So I'm going to add that, and that's going to give me $12,770. So job 302 is done, has been completed, and we're going to do the same thing for job 303. So job 303, we have materials of $2,200. We've got labor of $53.50. And then let's look at our overhead down here for our machine hours. We've got 41 machine hours at a rate of $40. That's going to give me $1,640 for my overhead. And that's going to give me a total of $91.90. Let's mark that. Okay. And then last but not least, we've got job 305. For job 305, I have materials of $42.30. I've got labor of $62.25. And I've got overhead of, this is job 305. I've got 70 hours at $40. That's going to be $2,800. Okay, and that's going to give me a total of $13,255. So now I am going to get a total of how much has been completed for those 4 jobs. And my total is $40,765. Okay, that is the total that of the jobs that have been completed, and then they need to be moved out of working process and into finished goods. Okay, because now these jobs are finished. So we're going to move this into our finished goods account. So finished goods is going to increase by $40,765. Okay, so we are going to debit it because we are increasing, we're moving the cost to that category. So now the costs associated with those 4 jobs are now sitting in finished goods. Okay, and we're moving it out of work in process. Okay, so work in process will decrease by $40,765 because the goods are no longer in process, they've been completed. So we decrease it from working process and we move it up to finished goods. Okay, that is letter F. And to be able to get that, you needed to do these calculations. The first 2 columns are from the top section, and let me go ahead and mark that we also finished 305. Okay, that way we know. Okay, so the ones highlighted have been completed. Those jobs are done. They're done and they have been moved to finished goods. Okay, that is letter F. Letter G. Jobs were shipped and customers were billed as follows. Job 301, 302, and 303. So from the jobs that were completed, 3 of those got shipped to the customers and billed to the customers. So we've sold them, but we haven't received the money yet. Okay, we've been shipped and the customers have been billed. We're just pending to receive payment for them. Okay, so for that, let's do a little table. I've got the calculation here for letter G. So we've got job number 301 that was sold, 302 was sold, and 303 was sold. Okay, now we have to figure out, well, how much did we spend on manufacturing those jobs? Okay, so we've already done the calculation up here, so we're going to get the total. So the information is going to flow from here down here. Okay, so cost of goods sold, how much did I spend in materials, labor, and overhead for job 301? I spent $5,550. For job 302, $12,770. And for job 303, $9,190. That is how much we spend manufacturing those jobs. Okay. Now, how much do we sell them for? So if we look at down here, they give you the sales price. So job 301 was sold for $9,000. Okay, that was the sales price. Job 302 was $16,150. And then job 303, we sold it for $12,800. Okay. So my total for my cost of goods sold is going to be, for these 3 jobs, $27,510. That is how much it cost me to manufacture those 3 jobs. And I sold those goods for $37,950. Okay, so now we have to do the entry to record that sale. We've made those sales right there, letter G. Okay, so it says here that we have billed the customers, which means we have not gotten paid. If we have not gotten paid, then we have to set up a receivable, accounts receivable. This is an asset account, and this is where we put anything that is owed to us. Someone owes me money, I'm going to set up a receivable. In this case, these individuals for jobs 301, 302, and 303 owe me $37,950 because that is what I sold it for. The total is $37,950. Okay, and what am I going to record? I'm going to record my sales. Sales is a revenue account with a normal balance of a credit. Okay, we learned that in Principles of Financial Accounting. Okay, so the first entry is to record the sale. Here we have our accounts receivable is being set up, so we can remember that these people owe us money, $37,950, and we recorded the sale for $37,950 because the sale was made this period. Okay, now the second entry is to account for your cost of goods sold. Okay, so how much did I spend manufacturing? Let me write it out. The cost of goods sold. Okay, so how much did you spend in manufacturing these 3 jobs? Well, our total cost of goods sold is $27,510. Okay, now we're going to record an entry to our cost of goods sold so we can put it in our books that this is how much we spent manufacturing these 3 jobs. Okay, $27,510. Okay, so now we are moving them from the finished goods to actually being sold. So now what we're going to do is we're going to decrease the balance in finished goods because these goods are no longer there because they've been sold. So the finished goods account will decrease by the $27,510. Remember, the finished goods account keeps track of all of the goods that are available to be sold. Okay, when we move the manufacturing process from working process to finished goods, that tells me this is what I have available. It's another bucket. This is everything that I have available to be sold. Once it's sold, we take it out of the bucket. So that means that we would need to decrease our finished goods account. Okay. So that is the entry that we need to do to record our sale and then to record our cost of goods sold and update our records in our end. Okay. So this table is what we use to calculate entry for letter G. Okay. So that is the first part of the requirement. Okay. Journalize the entries, which we've done. Okay. Now, requirement 2 says post the appropriate entries to T accounts for working process and finished goods. Okay. Using the identifying letters as transaction codes. Okay. So I've created my 2 T accounts that they want us to keep track for. They want us to keep track of working process and finished goods. So what are we going to do? We're going to go and we're going to locate working process first. Okay. So I have working process here. That is transaction B. Okay. And I've got a debit of $41,595. Okay. I'm going to continue looking for working process. I have another entry over here on letter E. Sorry about that. Okay. Letter E is for 12,000 debit. Okay. And I'm going to keep on going down. I've got another entry here for working process. Now I have a credit of 40,765. That is letter F. So I'm going to put letter F. And it is 40,765 credit. Okay. And I'm going to keep on. And that's all I have. I have 3 entries to my working process. Okay. So now let me move. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do my calculation. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my 41,595 plus my 12,000. That gives me 53,595. I'm going to subtract my credit of 40,765. So that's going to give me an ending balance of 12,830 debit to that account. Okay. So my balance is going to be 12,830. So that is working process. We're going to do the same thing for my finished goods. Okay. We're going to go and we're going to locate all of our entries to finished goods. So let's look. Finished goods, finished goods. And here we have an entry right here. Let me color it another color. So I have finished goods, letter F. Debit of 40,765. So I'm going to have a letter F here. And I've got a debit of 40,765. And then I am looking for finished goods down here. I've got a credit. I'm going to do letter G. I have a credit of 27,510. Okay. So now I'm going to calculate my ending balance. I only have 1 debit, 1 credit. So let's get our calculators out. And we have a debit of 40,765 minus 27,510. That gives me an ending balance of 13,255. 13,255. And this is a balance. Okay. So these are my 2 balances for the 2 accounts that we were requested. I have working process of 12,830. That means that I have manufacturing. I'm manufacturing specific jobs, and these jobs have not been completed. They're still in the working process phase. Okay, I've got $12,830 worth of that, and then in my finished goods, this is in my bucket where the jobs have been completed and they're ready to be sold, I've got $13,255 sitting in my finished goods. The jobs have been completed. We are just pending the sale. Okay, so we need to be able to differentiate between the two. Okay, that is requirement 2. Okay, calculating those ending balances. Requirement 3, prepare a schedule of unfinished jobs to support the balance in the work in process account. So we've already calculated that in work in process, we have a balance of $12,830. But I don't know what makes up $12,830. So we have to create a schedule of those jobs that have not been completed. Okay? So if you recall, I was marking off the jobs that we were working on that were completed. Remember? Those are the jobs that have been completed. So the ones that are not marked are the jobs that we have not completed. Okay, so we've got 2 jobs that we have not completed. It's job 304 and job 306. So we're going to create the schedule. Okay, 304 and 306. Those are the 2 jobs that we have not completed. Now if we look at 304, materials is $1,900 and labor is $2,300. So we're going to bring that down. $1,900 and $2,300. Now for our factory overhead, we're going to get our calculator and we are looking at job 304. 304 had 63 hours of machine hours at a rate of $40 an hour. That's going to give me $2,520 of the overhead. So I'm going to add that up. Sorry, I put in the wrong one. I'm going to add that up. And that gives me $6,720. Now the other job is 306. We have not finished that one. We've got $1,770 in materials, $2,900 in labor. So we're going to bring that info down, $1,770 and $2,900. For my overhead, for job 306, I've got 36 machine hours at a rate of 40. That gives me $1,440, okay, of overhead. So that's my total, $6,110. So my ending balance for my 2 jobs that have not been completed is, let's see what it is, $12,830. Okay. Now what is that number? That number should tie to this number over here, $12,830. So your working process amount of $12,830 should tie to your schedule, and this is the detail of what makes up your $12,830. Job 304 and 306 is what is pending, is what is still in my working process. Okay, we have not completed these jobs, so that is what's still pending. So that number should tie to your T account for working process. Okay, very good. Now that is requirement 3. Requirement 4 is to prepare a schedule of completed jobs on hand to support the balance on the finished goods account. Okay. So these are the jobs that have been completed but have not been sold. Okay. So remember, we had completed jobs over here of job 301, 302, 303, and 305. We sold jobs 301, 302, and 303. So that means that the one that we have not sold is that particular job right there. Okay, job 305. That is the one that we have completed, but we have not sold. Okay, so basically that is the information, but they're wanting you to create a schedule of its own. So we're going to go ahead and we've already identified that the job that was completed but not sold is 305. So we would have to go back to letter F. It tells you the jobs that are completed, 301, 302, 303, and 305. And then in letter G, it tells you that job 301, 302, and 303 have been sold, which means that the one that is pending to be sold is 305. Okay, so we're going to have job 305. Direct materials for 305 is 4230 and 6225. Okay, 4230, 62.25, and my overhead for 305, it's 70 hours at a rate of 40. That's going to be $2,800. So that will give you your schedule of the job that has been completed but has not been sold. Okay, so it's pending to be sold, 13,255. So then this number needs to tie to this T account over here. Okay, so when you looked at your finished goods, you're saying, hey, I've got 13,255 of finished goods. Why is that? Well, if you look at your schedule, okay, job 305 is complete, but we have not sold it yet. Okay, so we need to figure out what's happening, what's the delay, what's going on. Okay, so it's just a lot of data. It's taking it a step at a time, analyzing what's happening in each of the transactions, identifying what information has been used, which jobs have been completed, which jobs have been sold. It's just a lot of critical thinking as you're progressing through the problem. So this covers quite a bit. It covers, your journal entries. It covers several schedules: the schedule of unfinished jobs, the schedule of completed jobs. It helps us calculate the working process and finished goods, and tying those balances on your T accounts to the specific schedules. Okay, so that is the end of this problem. I know it's a little bit lengthy. Just make sure that before you attempt the problem or any of your homework problems, that you read the chapter before you begin, and that as you're working the problems, you go back to the ebook, to the specific sections, and review that information so you can have a better understanding of what is it that you're doing. Okay, so that is it for problem 16.2. If you have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to reach out. I do have office hours. Please refer to your syllabus for those. And that is it. Until next time. Bye-bye.